Why hello there, and welcome back to Let's Make Us a Character. Since the days of advanced Dungeons & Dragons, one problem has continued to plague tabletop role-playing game publishers. And that is that in order for an entire group of people to play a game, all you need to buy is one, or at the most, a few books. You can buy additional things if you want, but for most players, all you will need is access to the book, a piece of paper, and a set of dice, which you don't even have to buy from the publisher. You could literally be buying dice from their competitors and using them in their game. And in the late 2000s, it was getting even worse, as the major publishers were losing a lot of money to the indie piracy. It was piracy, not indie publishers providing better, more niche products, often in a more convenient and accessible format. That's ridiculous. The only explanation for falling sales must have been that people were pirating books through the internet now. It was all those damn PDFs that were to blame. Seriously, Wizards of the Coast actually released the 3 4th edition core rulebooks in PDF, but not any additional releases, and stopped digital distribution of the core books less than a year later, which is generally believed to have been in reaction to the big bad piracy boogeyman. Which, aside from putting them technologically back behind what companies like Eden Studios were doing in 2003, probably lost them a hilarious amount of money by ironically making piracy the only way to get a PDF of a Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition book, other than scanning it yourself. And aside from just turning down huge piles of money because new technology bad, another important battle plan in the war on accessibility was the resurrection of the boxed set format, as well as specifically designing games to require additional physical objects to play. Physical objects that you could only get from the publisher and could not be conveniently pirated. And as part of that incredibly shady business trend, in 2009, Fantasy Flight Games, yes, every edition of this game was designed and published by a different company, brought us Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 3rd edition, as a $100 box set that really blurs the lines between board game and role-playing game. Now, they did eventually release a standalone book version of this game, kinda, and that is a thing I will discuss later, but the box set version is the game as it was intended to be played, and therefore the version I will be covering here. And because of some of the, let's just say, unique qualities of this game, this video may be a bit below the usual standards of the series, just because I do not have access to all of the stuff required to play this game. As mentioned, that was the idea. So I will be working off of whatever resources I am able to glean from the internet. Because as much as this wasn't worth the $100 price tag in 2009, it is even less worth it now. And now that I've probably already spent more time talking about this game than it's really worth, let's make us a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 3rd edition character. As is usual, we first need to select our character's race, the options being Reiklander, Dwarf, High Elf, and Wood Elf. So halflings are gone, and there are now 2 kinds of elf. And let's go with Reiklander, which is just human, but from a specific province. A thing that, yeah, is kinda stupid, but we're in a sea of stupid here, so who cares? And then we write that down on our official pre-printed character sheet. The box set included a whole pad of character sheets, and if you run out, maybe they'll sell you more. I'm not actually sure if that was an item you could buy. And as a Reiklander, we reduce the cost of career transitions by 1, get 5 additional creation points, can add 2 white squares to a single check once per session, and have a wound threshold equal to 9 plus our toughness rating, but we do not have a toughness rating yet. And that's actually it for the race. So next we draw 3 career cards, and we've got Servant, Dockhand, and Thug. Each career has 2 primary attributes, a number of skills and advance options, as well as a stance meter and talent sockets, which are things that I will unfortunately have to explain later. And we have to choose one of these options, so let's go with Dockhand. And we don't really have to write any of the career stuff down on our character sheet, because the career card just kind of docks onto the character sheet. Careers also each have an ability and associated ability card, and I don't actually have the ability card for Dockhand, but it is add 5 to encumbrance limit. But now on to our characteristics, so back to the character sheet. Characteristics have been reduced from 8 to 16, depending on how you want to count them, in the previous editions to just 3 physical and 3 mental attributes, because those are the stats in Dungeons & Dragons, and I guess if you're already making a substandard piece of generic corporate design garbage, you might as well copy the leader in that field. So let's pull up the default ratings by race table, and as a human, Reiklander, we start with 2 each in our Strength, Constitution, Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. Oh, I mean Strength, Toughness, Agility, Intelligence, Willpower, and Fellowship. Totally different. Then we increase each of our career's primary characteristics by 1, and for a Dockhand, those are Strength and Toughness. Then we get 25 creation points. 20 is default, but it's 25 for humans. And raising an attribute costs a number of points equal to the new rating, so from 2 to 3 costs 3 points, 3 to 4 costs 4 points, and so on. And let's just raise each characteristic by 1 for 20 points. And now that we have our toughness rating, we add it to 9 for a wound threshold of 13. We can also spend our creation points on our wealth, skills, talents, and actions. So let's spend 1 point on our wealth to be poor, starting play with a set of durable, comfortable clothes, cloth rucksack, dagger, quarterstaff, light crossbow, or hand weapon, let's just say dagger, and 50 silver coins. Then let's spend 2 points to get 3 skill trainings and 1 specialization, and we choose those from our career skills, and let's go with athletics, intimidation, and guile. And then we'll specialize intimidation in violence. Then talents, and let's spend 2 points to get 2 of those, and like everything else, talents now come in card form, and have specific types, and I will explain more about this in a little bit. And finally, actions, which of course are also cards. Each player gets all of the 8 basic action cards, and for our remaining 0 points, we can select 1 additional card. And now back to whatever you'd call this situation we've got going on here. As mentioned earlier, our career card has a number of typed talent sockets, and also as mentioned earlier, talents have a specific type. And as a Dockhand, we have a reputation and focus talent sockets, so we can insert 1 reputation and 1 focus talent into those sockets. Even if we had more talents than that, we could only have as many active talents at once as specified sockets. Then we build our stance meter out of interlocking cardstock pieces, so that there can be another thing in the box, and basically this is used to track how cautious or reckless a character is being at any given time, and will also be explained further later. And this character is done, more or less. However, there is still one more element for this whole mess here, the party sheet, which is like a career card, but for the whole party, and has its own special ability and a number of talent sockets into which any player can socket one of their talents and have it affect the entire party. Also this whole tension meter and fortune pool thing, which I don't really want to bother explaining, so I'm not going to. And that is most of the stuff that you need to have in front of you on the table to actually attempt to play this game. And at this point you might be thinking, okay, well that's a little cumbersome, but it's not that bad. And yeah, well, I haven't gotten to the mechanics yet. which means that it's time to talk about the stupid custom dice. The mechanics of this game use a dice pool made up from 7 types of custom dice, which of course come in the box set or can be purchased separately from Fantasy Flight Games. Or, could be purchased during the 5-ish years when the game was actually being supported. So let's say that we are attempting to intimidate a goblin with threats of violence. That would be a test of our Intimidate skill versus the goblin's Discipline. Intimidate is based on strength, so we get 4 blue characteristic dice for our 4 points of strength, plus 1 yellow expertise die for our training in Intimidate, and 1 white fortune die for our specialization in violence. And Discipline is based on willpower, and the goblin has a willpower of 2, which is less than our strength of 4, but not less than half, so we add 1 purple challenge die. But let's say that we're going kinda crazy here, and we are 2 steps into the reckless side of our stance meter. That replaces 2 of our blue characteristic dice with the red reckless dice. And if we were in the conservative side of the stance meter, they would be replaced with however many green conservative dice. Anyway, then we roll all of the dice, the results of which are either blank or one of 9 different symbols. Then, if the results have more hammers than swords, you succeed, with all of the other symbols triggering assorted positive and negative outcomes. So, as you can see, it's all very simple and intuitive. And just in case you're wondering, the box set came with 8 characteristic dice, 6 fortune and misfortune dice, and 4 expertise, challenge, reckless, and conservative dice. Although, quote, each player will probably also wish to acquire their own set of dice for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, so they can quickly assemble their characters' dice pools. Additional dice are available separately. And they were, for a while, in packs of 12, for $12, which included 3 characteristic dice, 2 fortune, reckless, and conservative dice, and 1 expertise, misfortune, and challenge dice. Which is absolutely not enough to play even a basic low-level game. And of course now are significantly more expensive than $12 since everything has been out of print for like a decade. There also was a dice rolling app available, but I believe only for iProducts and is of course also no longer available. Incidentally, if you wanted to play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st or 2nd edition, you could just go and download a PDF for under $20 and play with the dice you already own or any virtual dice roller. And that is all of the time I'm willing to spend on a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition character. Overall, it's kind of like if you took the worst elements of designer board games and role-playing games from the time and combined them into one wholly abysmal product that somehow manages to be both overly complicated and overly simplistic at the same time. Now, admittedly, I am a little biased here because just in general, I do not like anti-consumer product design, and specifically, I loathe custom dice. Like, I have dice, I like my dice, and specifically, I like that my dice can be used to play hundreds of different games. And from a designer perspective, I really like that I can just assume that the average consumer will own at least 7 specialized tabletop gaming dice. What I don't like is games that are specifically designed to make you buy things that can only then be used for that one game. And that's really what this is, a game that was never designed to be good, but designed to require things. You need the career cards, the ability cards, the talent cards, the party sheet, the punch-out tokens and pieces for the stance meter, the action cards, and, of course, all of the dice that are useless for any other game. Basically, the only real design goal here was to justify the $100 box of crap as something that the game could not exist without. Although, you may recall me mentioning that there was a standalone, non-boxed version of this game. Kinda. And the thing about that is, the rules were released as standalone books, but those books still assume that you have all of these physical elements, and presents itself more as a reference book for those elements. Although there is a WFRP Lite section in the book, which they literally try to dissuade you from using, which is a set of alternate rules that only requires the player guide, game master's guide, and stupid custom dice, and ironically regular D10s for rolling on tables, because their dice were so uselessly specialized that they couldn't even design tables that worked with them. So, hypothetically, yes, you could play this monstrosity without the box set, but because it was never intended to be played without all of that junk, doing so is incredibly more difficult. Like, I will say one nice thing here, they did try. They tried to make a playable version of this game, but because the design was done to facilitate all of those physical items, it just doesn't work out very well. For example, instead of hundreds of action cards, you have dozens of pages that look like this, and you need to copy all that information onto a special action sheet. So while you can play without the box set, it's just really not worth the effort to do so. Also, the player's guide, game master guide, and one set of 12 dice was actually like $2 more than the box set. And you really need at least 3 or 4 of those dice sets to actually play the game as intended, because each pack only comes with 1 challenge and 1 misfortune dice. Now, of course, that is unless you waited until like 2012, when they were liquidating those 2 books for like 60% off. Which is, let's just say, not a common thing you would be doing for a successful product line. And then in 2014, the product line was officially declared dead after no releases for more than a year. And that is really all I have to say on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition. Possibly the only game I've looked at on this channel that I would not play unless I were being paid to do so. And yes, that includes Fatal. But now that that ordeal is over with, make sure to join me in the next exciting episode when I will be looking at the latest edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which reasonably must be better than this one. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Randy Mulholland, and Toshi Rokuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos floating around screen that either myself or the cold, heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.